We get a lot of questions from people who are asking, do you need money to start a fashion brand? It's probably one of the most commonly asked questions. So what would you say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, when you start a brand, it's an investment. You're going to have to invest. Typically what we see is like, we have people come to us and they'll say, okay, I really want to start a brand. And I'll be like, great. So, how much do you have to invest over the next 6 months, 12 months? They're like, £400. And I'm just like, yeah, not going to work, because the reality is you're going to have to spend money on marketing, on stock, on, pre-launch, on samples, right, et cetera, on outsourcing work. So typically what that looks like is about 5 to 10K over the course of 6 to 12 months. That's typically what we'll see, and that's what in my personal experience and other mentors at Caliper, friends of mine that have had brands over the years, most of them have started with 5 to 10K. Some people do it with less, but if they're really, really good at marketing, they know what they're doing, and maybe they already have a small team or something, then they could maybe do it with less. But if you're just starting out, then 5 to 10K is typically what we see. Yeah.
When you're starting out with that amount of money, a lot of people make the mistake of buying stock up front. Is that a necessity when you're starting out? Like, do you need to buy that stock up front, or can you wait?
You definitely don't need to buy stock up front. This is one of the things I learned in 2019 when we did a Kickstarter. It went really well, and we ended on something like between Kickstarter and Indiegogo, something like $400,000 combined. It was like £295,000 plus then on Kickstarter, then plus the Indiegogo stuff. And what we learned from doing that was that you can pre-launch really effectively using Facebook ads and also email marketing campaigns. You can build up almost a pre-launch list, build an audience, warm them up with content and with value over time, and then when it's time to launch, you create a mini like launch countdown, and people have already been used to your brand. You've given them value, you've warmed them up, they're excited, and then when it's time for them to buy, they're ready because they've already seen your brand. You've warmed them up with value, with content, and then you give them a cool offer, a cool call to action, right? Maybe it's a discount or a bonus or an extra free product for being on that waiting list. So that's a mistake that we see a lot with people that start brands, right? Is that they go and they buy a bunch of stock, and then they're like, shit, how am I going to sell it, right? As opposed to thinking more strategically and thinking, how can I test if people want to buy this before I go and invest in it?
So you mentioned Indiegogo, Kickstarter. Do you recommend those platforms for all brands, or is it something very niche or specific?
No, I don't recommend it for all brands because Kickstarter and Indiegogo, originally they were designed for like really innovative products, right? So inventions, products that were really cool, products that had something kind of really unique and different about them. And you saw that across lots of like little gizmos and gadgets and all sorts. But obviously marketers being marketers, they decided to, hack that and then create like, a product that was like, I don't know, a pair of, jeans or a watch or whatever. And instead of the product being necessarily unique and different, they created a unique hook and a unique brand story around it. And then with really good content, they hooked people in. So with Kickstarter, I always say like, it can work really well if you have a really good hook about your brand. So the one that we did was we had one called The Mechanical Watch Reinvented. Now, did we necessarily reinvent the mechanical watch? No, of course not, right? But what we did was we understood that mechanical watches, like skeleton mechanical watches, were traditionally very outdated, very kind of traditional looking, and we were like, well, how can we make this cool and different? So, we wrapped our brand around it, and we came up with this concept of like reinventing the mechanical watch, and so that became our hook. And then on Kickstarter, it worked really well because it was like something new and unique and different, and people were like, oh, this is cool. But the reality is, Kickstarter is not gonna generate you hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in sales, right? When you do well on Kickstarter, they will bump you up the algorithm, you'll get more reach. But I have friends that have done millions and millions on Kickstarter, and pretty much across the board. There's some exceptions, but the rule is generally most Kickstarters are built on the back of very, very successful paid advertising campaigns, particularly with Facebook. They've spent a lot of money driving Facebook ads to usually build an email list to then get conversions on Kickstarter. And that's how, again, you can get, you can have a Kickstarter that does 100 grand in an hour or in 5 minutes or whatever the time frame is, because as soon as you hit send on that launch email, all those people from your list, you've got tens of thousands of people on that list, they all go across to your Kickstarter and then they buy. So that's how you can get that huge demand quickly. It's not like Kickstarter is like, oh, here these guys are with a brand, let's just give them all of our customers. No, they'll try and help you, but 9 times out of 10, successful Kickstarters are based on paid, great, well-executed paid advertising campaigns.
By the way, if you like what you're seeing so far, make sure you hit like and subscribe. We'll be putting more of these videos out every month, so you don't want to miss it. So scaling back a little bit here, let's talk about when you're first starting out, what are the 2 main things that you need to start a fashion brand?
So I think really, when you're first getting started, that first 6 to 12 months, you need 2 things. One is you need a scalable flagship product. 2 is you need a scalable marketing channel, right? When we say flagship product, we've talked about this before. What we mean is a product that has the ability to scale, so it has the margin, right? Direct to consumer, that typically will be 3x markup minimum. Because if you have less than that, you can still make it work, but it's going to be tight. You're not leaving yourself a lot of wiggle room for your cost per acquisition basically on Facebook ads. 3x markup, direct consumer. If you're then looking at retail channels, I'd be looking at least a 5x markup, right? Because obviously retail is going to take part of that margin. So it's important that you get that product really well defined early on and get that right. And then a scalable marketing channel is usually going to be, right now, as of 2021, 2022, it's going to be Facebook ads, it's going to be IG influencer marketing, gifting campaigns, and it's then also going to be TikTok as well. So seeing a lot of traction on TikTok, and some brands have done really, really well on that. But it's a different audience, and you need to know kind of how it works and who is on TikTok first before you just kind of throw yourself on there,
So you mentioned retail a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about the changing landscape, because recently, as you know, we've had a bunch of students come in to work with us who used to have successful brands that worked, mainly in wholesale, who were mainly in retail, and now they, with COVID and the changing landscape, they're now struggling and trying to figure out e-commerce. So what are your thoughts on that shift, and what would you say to those people who are looking to dive into e-commerce?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, and it's really a distribution problem where before the internet, right, if you think about how someone would actually buy a product is, let's say, for example, I wanted to buy, a hat or something. I would walk into a store and I would see a hat and I'd be like, wow, that's a really nice hat. I'd buy it. And then afterwards, I would learn about the brand. The product is the first touch point with the brand. And then the brand comes afterwards. You learn about the brand, you start to like the brand, then you start to buy more things from the brand, right? So you become more loyal to the brand, and then that extends the brand's lifetime value. The internet has kind of reverse engineered that, where now the first touch point with the brand is actually content. So someone's scrolling, on Instagram, on Facebook or whatever, a lot of brand marketing is interruption-based marketing. Right, so Google Ads is one thing where people are actually searching out your content, which is intent based, right? So they know already in their mind what they want. So when you're looking on Amazon or you're looking on Google or eBay, right? These are places, they're marketplaces or they're search engines where you have an idea about what you want. Facebook and Instagram, people are not on those platforms to buy your product. So what happens is, you have interruption-based marketing where you're flashing out a message to distract someone, and then going to be like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Then they have to stop scrolling, stop being interested in their friends and their daily life, to then click off and go and buy from your brand or learn about your brand, right? So the internet reverse engineered this problem where now the most important touch point is your content, right? Because that's how your brand is positioned. Then once they fall in love with the lifestyle of your brand, with how your brand's positioned, with your brand values, your mission, your story, Obviously your products as well, but you tell a story about your products. You don't just say, here's a hat, I want to buy it, right? You tell a story about it, the materials, how it's made, where it's made, right? Once they've then fallen in love with your content and your brand, they then will go and buy your products. So pre-internet, it was, it was product first, brand later. Not all the time, but many, many times that's how it was. And now with the internet, it's brand first, product later, oftentimes. Again, and this is dependent, I'm specifically talking about when you're doing interruption-based marketing with Facebook and with Instagram. I'm not talking about when someone's already searching out your product, right, with an intention to buy it. So I think that, again, I call that the distribution problem in the sense of like, you could have a brand 10, 20, 30 years ago, and we talk to people all the time, right, who have had a retail-based brand previously, and they're trying to transition to online and they're struggling. And I think that the reason is because they're still thinking about it as like, oh, well, because my product's good, people should buy it, right? And it's that old way of thinking, and they've not really adapted to the new way of thinking with the internet, which is like, the brand is the most important thing. The content is the most important thing. It's an exchange of value. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I would say is like, if you're struggling to transition from retail to online, it's probably because maybe you're not thinking about it in the right way. And practically what that means is you're not valuing the content and the brand. You're overvaluing the product.